The new Gran Turismo physics set is mightily impressive, even if it is a little buggy at the moment. One thing that was deep on the changelog that I've missed, and likely most of you missed as well, is this little snippet. Grip reduction on the racing line in wet conditions and hydroplaning physics were adjusted. Not a lot of people care about rain in Gran Turismo 7, even though that Gran Turismo 7 weather implementation is actually pretty good, and games of Gran Turismo 7 type get a lot of undeserved hate. So today's video is going to be about the new Gran Turismo weather system or weather driving, but not just by itself. We're actually going to compare it to something that I consider to be the best weather implementation at the moment for sim racing or any other racing in general, which would be Iracing Tempest system. I've done a video on it when it was launched, and I think it's something really remarkable. You should check it out. But before going there, Gran Turismo 7 has huge limitations in their weather system. It doesn't work in all tracks, just a select few ones. Where it works rather well. Just like subscribing to this channel. I'm trying to get 100,000 subscribers, so do it now. Do it now! Alright, I did a couple of races in each title. 10 laps at the Nürburgring with GT3-ish cars, and I'm saying GT3-ish cars because Gran Turismo 7 doesn't really have GT3 cars. In one wet race, it was wet from start to finish, moderate rain during all the race. Another one was with changing conditions and all against maximum AI, which is 20 in both titles. This is where the first major difference between titles is. Gran Turismo allows for massively changing weather conditions within the race time. That means a race with 2 laps could have multiple weather types changing incredibly rapidly, a bit like Project Cars 2 and Automobilista 2. Iracing Tempest is different. The weather pattern can't be as drastic. The weather slots will be a minimum of 30 minutes, at least is what I was able to figure out in the Weather Manager system. While most of the weather patterns work like this, the extreme weather variation with heavy showers, which then changes to sunny spells and back, happens especially during summertime. In my opinion, it's good to have the possibility of such extreme variations, but let's not fixate too much on this. The other major difference you're going to find out is the carryover state from session to session in iRacing, which is incredibly important for wet handling and the development of a rain line. We're going to talk about this in just a second. So let's start with Gran Turismo 7 with the new grip logic, starting with the wet line. Gran Turismo comes with a pre-baked rubbered in line if you are starting with wet weather. This isn't exactly bad, as the rain line will be there, but the game assumes the track is being used prior to the session instead of having the rubber being washed off after multiple rain cycles if nobody touched the track for a while. For those who look for rain versus rubber line without any inputs from a session, it's actually great. Gran Turismo 7 was always about general simplicity in design but deep in the details, but if you're looking for a track to develop session to session, you're not going to find it here. But I was actually shocked how good it felt to drive. I was driving in the Audi Group 3, which if you ever drove it in Gran Turismo 7, you'll know it has been always a death sentence. It's a bit like the 1.9 Assetto Corsa Competizione Audi Evo 2, but with much extra deathly death. The new physics did this car very well, and the wet handling is incredibly surprising in general. The wet line versus dry line is definitely there and incredibly relevant if you want to keep the car in control. Braking and throttling up as you expected, it needs to be on the wet line, minimizing the time spent on the dry line or crossing over it. There's definitely a huge difference between lines where it's not just less grip, but definitely a bigger deal than that. The water level of the track creates handling challenges. Crossing over the rubber in line makes the car lock up a bit if you go over it, or having the car just slightly in the rubber line, it definitely upsets the handling, leading sometimes into brown flag moments if it's on a very heavy braking area. As for the driving itself, I was very surprised. I actually dig it. Gran Turismo 7 was pretty competent before, but now with this new physics overall, it's another big step forward, even if it keeps some of the Gran Turismo handling we know about. The tires react more or less as you would expect them to. The throttle needs to be feathered, the braking is far more subtle now, especially with the Audi as the rear wants to step in front, so trail braking becomes more important. This is likely partly the reason Gran Turismo 7 players are complaining about understeer, but not totally. You definitely need to do a lot of trail braking now. The tires' usability develops as you expect of them. There's definitely a crossover where slicks become useless as more rain comes in, and definitely vice versa. Which leads to the last point, which is the track progression. The extreme scenario that we've used for this video shows that the pre-baked rubber inline is useless to race in the rain, and it's also the case for a very good while when the track dries up. This means that even with the pre-bake, Gran Turismo 7 develops the track dynamically with the cars, which means the new dry line moves closer to where the wet line is. It's a really fantastic detail there. I know I'm talking very highly of Gran Turismo 7 weather system, and therefore I needed a sanity check with iRacing. But first of all, not related with the weather at all, iRacing AI is mint. I really need to do a video on this AI alone. Comment below if you want to see this. Okay, back to the weather. I think you'll be shocked to know that the biggest difference between titles isn't really track grip logic or physics or even the tires. It's actually the track development that allows to bring rubber from previous sessions. That means if there isn't a previous session, the track will be clean and where you drive is not really the regular wet line, but it'll be closer to a race line, minus the puddle development and of course the curbs. Which is interesting as the places I've had issues with stabilizing the car were exactly the same between titles. Namely the hairpin at turn 1, the inside puddle and the outside pool on that area, the curbing at Mercedes Arena, the Michael Schumacher S, turn 11 because I'm really not sure how to say the name of this corner, and then the GP chicane. At turn 11 I've had exactly the same snap in both titles. Fishtail into the left barriers after a massive hydroplaning where I was just saying, Jesus, take the wheel. At the GP chicane, the car lifted at the chicane curb and then spun around, so in both titles, I avoided that curb like hell. The changing conditions race had a few laps of warm-up in the dry so we could develop a rubbered inline. There, the braking conditions were similar to Gran Turismo 7. Handling-wise, I think the main difference is that the 296 GT3 felt it made more sense to drive. The tires had more slimp angle or more usability both in dry and wet, even if you were using the same wet tire. And overall, I think it just feels better to drive and it's more connected than Gran Turismo 7, not only in the way that it drives, but also in force feedback. iRacing has definitely a better handling model in both the dry and the wet, and it's a little more compelling in my opinion. One last point, which is not totally related with the weather system, at least not by itself, which will be the graphic talk. Gran Turismo 7 looks the part in every weather, including the rain. The color renditions are absolutely perfect. I really love the color temperature that they produce, and also the HDR rendition. I use a 55-inch TV for sim racing, and you should see that video as well. HDR10 on this TV looks pretty great with Gran Turismo 7. iRacing, of course, I'm sad to say, is definitely the older title, and it doesn't look as well here. But following a car in the rain in iRacing feels definitely more real. It has that huge wet puff coming around, and it's more challenging. The water spray is scary, especially when reaching the braking area. It just feels great. In this case, I think iRacing just feels like you're racing more instead of Gran Turismo. Anyways, I'm going to say something that it's going to be quite divisive. I want to hear your thoughts on this. If iRacing Tempests released how Gran Turismo 7 is at the moment in terms of wet and dry and rubber inlines and aquaplaning, but keeping all the bells and whistles that it has as of this moment, and of course the wonderful dynamic track it has where it keeps the lines of what is rubbered or not, I think everybody would praise the system as that Tempest. I think everybody would be very happy with it. And therefore, I think that the hate Gran Turismo 7 or, Simcades in general deserve is a bit too much because, in my opinion, Gran Turismo 7 has something truly remarkable where they're able to do something fantastic, keep all the difficulties or all the depth in it, but at the same time trying to make it welcoming for everybody to drive on these conditions. But anyways, I want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments below and subscribe to the channel.